Hey guys, tonight we descend into a forgotten alleyway of the Roman world, not the marble forums or epic battles, but something much colder, much stranger. Imagine this: the air is heavy with incense smoke, your feet crunch on dry gravel, and a woman in a soot-stained cloak whispers to something buried just beneath the dirt. Welcome to the miserable world of Roman necromancy, where the dead don't just rest, they're put to work. This isn't your polished version of Rome. This is where beggars scrape off grave mould for curses, soldiers carry bones for luck, and aristocrats hire witches to interrogate the afterlife like it's an unpaid intern. And tonight you're not just observing it, you're part of it. But don't worry, nothing bad ever happened to someone who just listened to a cursed whisper in the dark. Probably. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Maybe you're a 2 AM wanderer in Warsaw, or a 9 PM thinker in Hanoi. Wherever you are, we're all just trying to fall asleep while learning about something quietly horrifying. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The dirt is always colder at night, especially when it's been freshly dug, and you're kneeling beside a grave in the Roman countryside. Not a grand tomb, just a poor man's burial, covered by rough stones and the smell of damp leaves. The woman beside you, her name might be Canidia, or maybe that's just what she calls herself, uncorks a jar. The fumes hit your nose like vinegar and rot. She's not shocked. She's done this 100 times. Her voice is a rasp. Grave soil, goat's blood, fig ash. Speak. The words aren't Latin, but they're not quite anything else, either. You stare at the grave, and for a moment, you almost convince yourself that the dirt shifts. But this isn't a ghost story. This is real Roman necromancy, dirty, desperate, and far more bureaucratic than you'd think. Let's get one thing straight. The Romans were terrified of the dead. They held strict beliefs about the manes, the spirits of the departed, and what happened when you messed with them. On paper, necromancy was illegal, a crime associated with treason, blasphemy, and all around bad vibes, but off the record it was everywhere. You might think of necromancy as a fringe thing, some creepy loner muttering in a forest, but in Rome, it crept into politics, romance, and revenge. If you had enemies, a dead relative could be weaponized. If you lost a love, you could try to bring them back. If you were broke, you could hire yourself out to dig graves and whisper questions into the earth, and you never knew what might whisper back. Picture this: a senator, sweating under his robes, sneaks into a suburban tomb at midnight. He's not alone. He brings a tablet etched with the names of 3 rivals and a chicken heart soaked in wine. Why? Because he wants answers. Not from the gods. From Lucius, a deceased soothsayer known for his accurate predictions, before he was stabbed 23 times in a bar brawl. These rituals weren't just about spooky thrills. Romans believed that the dead could still access divine knowledge, that beyond the veil, in the shadowy fields of the underworld, were secrets who would win the next election, whether your wife was cheating, or where to find buried treasure. Of course, not all necromancers were welcome guests at parties. Many were seen as social outcasts, some were executed, but a lucky few got rich, powerful, or at least famous enough to have their stories written down, like Erictho. Now Erictho was a real piece of work, described in Lucan's Pharsalia. She lived in Thessaly, the region with a reputation for dark magic so strong, even the goats had anxiety. Erictho didn't wait for nightfall. She did her business in broad daylight. Her rituals involved plucking eyeballs from corpses, cutting tongues from the freshly hanged, and boiling parts of dead bodies to make talking soup. Charming. But even she had standards. Sort of. When a Roman general approached her before a battle, begging for guidance, she dragged a body out of a mass grave, stitched it back together, and forced it to speak about the future. She didn't summon ghosts, she commandeered them. This is where Roman necromancy gets especially weird. It wasn't just spirits floating around. It was about reanimating corpses, infusing them with temporary life, squeezing prophecy from their dry lungs like the world's most disturbing bagpipe. Here's a fun fact to lull you into an even deeper sleep. Roman graveyards were often placed outside the city walls, but close enough that people could still visit. They'd leave offerings, food, wine, sometimes a bit of hair. These were meant to appease the dead, make sure they stayed peaceful, because the last thing you wanted was a lemur, not the cute animal, but a vengeful ghost to show up during dinner and knock over your wine. And yes, the Romans had ghost classifications. Lemures were malevolent, Lares were household guardians, Manes were the general dead. You could invite them to your parties during Parentalia, a week-long festival of the dead, or accidentally summon them by forgetting your grandmother's favourite spice. You might think, well, that's manageable. Just be polite to ghosts. But Rome had a habit of building over old graves, erasing names, or converting burial grounds into theatres that meant that at any given moment, you could be walking over a cursed corpse who really didn't like plays. And if you wanted to use those spirits, you had to pay the price. Here's the part that feels like a bad dream. Many necromancers didn't just call on random spirits. They wanted violent deaths, suicides, murders, soldiers left unburied on foreign soil. These were the restless dead, easier to awaken, angrier when disturbed, and more likely to tell the truth. According to some rituals, if you offered them blood, animal or human, they'd whisper secrets back to you. Secrets not meant for the living. But how do you record something whispered by a corpse? Some used wax tablets, others carved responses into bones. A few just memorized everything and hoped not to go insane. You hear that whisper now. It's probably just the fan. Or maybe a spirit wants to tell you your neighbour's cat is potting something. Either way, try not to think about what's under your bed. Let's pause on one academic debate. Some historians argue whether Roman necromancy was truly spiritual or mostly psychological manipulation. That is, were people really hearing from the dead, or were they projecting what they wanted to hear? Maybe the necromancer was just reading you, not the bones. But try telling that to someone who swore they saw their dead brother mouth the word beware right before lightning struck. You shift your blankets. Something about this part of history, it clings to you, not because of the gore, but because it feels familiar. The desperation, the fear, the unanswered questions. Maybe you wouldn't crawl into a grave for answers, but you've wished, haven't you? To ask someone one last thing, to know if they're okay, to fix something. That's why Roman necromancy never really vanished. It just changed costumes. Now we call it closure, but back then, they called it science. Your eyes are heavier now. You're still kneeling beside that ancient Roman grave. The woman beside you finishes her chant. Nothing happens. And then something does. The candle flickers. Though there's no wind, the dirt groans. Your heart slows. Not from fear, but from the rhythmic pull of sleep. Because in this world, the dead don't rise screaming. They rise whispering. And their words sound a lot like dreams. You wake, or rather, you never quite slept to the sensation of cold stone beneath your knees. The grave is behind you now, but the whispers still linger, like the taste of ash on your tongue. You're deeper into the Roman world than you ever expected to be. And tonight, you're not crawling back out just yet, because tonight, we wander into a much stranger zone, the thriving marketplace of Roman magical services specifically, the cursed tablets, or defixiones, and the peculiar trade of cursing your enemies via lead plumbing. The day begins early for the scribe in the Subra district of Rome. He's not working on contracts or love poetry. No, he's engraving curse spells on the thin sheets of lead with a stylus so worn it's almost flat. His hands are cramped, his eyes strained. And his clients mostly angry lovers, jealous athletes, or vendors furious that someone undercut their fig prices. It's petty, it's dramatic, it's deeply human, and it's very, very Roman. Here's how it works. You come to this guy, let's call him Quintus, and you bring a name. Sometimes two. You might even describe your target, the tall baker with the lazy eye who stole my best wheat. Then you tell Quintus what you want. Not death. Necessarily. Just misfortune. Maybe they forget how to knead dough. Maybe they burn every loaf. Maybe their cat stops loving them. That's harsh. Even for Rome. Quintus writes it out on lead. A soft metal that resists time. He might include symbols, forks, snakes. Demonic figures, Latin scribbled backward. Sometimes he folds the tablet and drives a nail through it. And then, the fun part, he deposits it somewhere sacred. Usually a grave, a well, or a public bathhouse drain. Because we're better to summon dark forces than a public bath full of naked, complaining senators. You don't have to be a professional necromancer to curse someone in Rome. There were do-it-yourself kits in the form of mass-produced charms. Still, people liked outsourcing it, like today. It's easier to pay someone to hex your ex than to learn Latin grammar and buy your own goat entrails. But these curses weren't just emotional tantrums. Some were scarily detailed. Take this real one, discovered in Bath, England, then part of Roman Britannia. I curse him who has stolen my hooded cloak, whether man or woman, slave or free, that he may not have health until he returns it. That's right, someone summoned divine wrath because their hoodie was stolen. Others took it further. Let his limbs rot. Let him forget his name. Let his tongue swell until he can't speak of me again. Very subtle, very chill. Let's zoom out for a moment and consider this fun fact. Over 1/600 Roman curse tablets have been found. And that's just what survived. Most were written between the 1st century BCE and the 4th century CE. That's a long time to stay mad at someone. It shows just how common this was, not just among weird loners, but across every class. And remember, these tablets often involved necromancy. They weren't just tossed into the street. They were buried with corpses, especially those who had died young, violently, or without proper rites. Romans believed these spirits hadn't crossed into the afterlife properly and were still lingering, bored, and easily bribed. So, you put your curse tablet in their grave, whisper your request, maybe leave a little food or wine, and hope the spirit has nothing better to do than sabotage your boss's chariot wheels. Now here's the twist sometimes. These spirits didn't need convincing. Some historians argue whether the spirits were seen as tools or active participants. Were they summoned like customer service reps, or were they co-conspirators, ready to act out of their own unresolved bitterness? It's the ancient equivalent of sending a passive-aggressive email and CCing a ghost. Here's a lesser-known detail to make your pillow extra comfortable tonight. Some curse tablets weren't even meant to be found. They were folded, pierced, and buried so deeply that the sender assumed they would never see the light again. Until, of course, archaeologists dug them up centuries later and read them aloud on university YouTube channels. You know, like this one. Some scholars believe certain phrases had to be whispered, some had to be read backward, others required a ritual bath before and after. One even demanded silence for 24 hours after writing it. Try doing that in Rome without getting distracted by the bread vendors yelling about 3 for a denarius. And yet, despite the secrecy, people kept doing it. Cursing wasn't fringe, it was embedded in everyday Roman life. Now, you're walking through a necropolis at dusk. You pass by rows of tombs carved with names you can't pronounce. Some have offerings, bread, flowers, coins, others are just stone and silence. You stop by one, unfold your own curse tablet, because why not when in Rome, and read your complaint aloud. The tablet reads, "To the spirit of Marcus, the charioteer who crashed thrice, I offer this charm, curse Gaius. The loud neighbour who sings off-key at sunrise, make his rooster forget how to crow. Your handwriting is bad, but the spirit probably gets the gist. You fold the tablet, drop it into a crack, and walk away. The soft clink of lead echoing behind you. Did it work? Who knows, but it felt good. You pass a statue of Hermes at the edge of the cemetery, protector of travellers and psychopomps, the one who guides souls to the underworld. His eyes are blank stone, but you feel watched. Romans feared the dead, but they also trusted them, not just for secrets or revenge, but for justice. In a society where courts were slow and bribery common, sometimes that the only fair trial came from a restless spirit with nothing to lose. It's a little like calling your grandma to complain, except your grandma lives in Hades and occasionally rearranges the furniture when she's angry. Academic sidebar. Some historians debate whether curse tablets were psychological tools more than magical ones. In other words, was the act of cursing therapeutic? Did people feel better because they believed in it, or because they finally expressed rage without consequences? And isn't that kind of beautiful to have an outlet, a way to scream into the earth and have it echo back? So tonight, as you drift deeper into sleep, you're surrounded not by monsters, but by a city full of people who were just like you. People who got mad, who fell in love, who lost things, who wanted anyone to fix it. Sometimes they turned to gods, sometimes to ghosts, and sometimes they just needed to write something down on a piece of lead. Now, as your breath slows and your thoughts fade, imagine a little spirit reading your curse with confusion, then shrugging and going back to sleep. You should too. You awake again, but not really. You're hovering now, drifting just above the threshold of Roman midnight, where dreams and rituals blur into the same smoky air. The whispering has stopped. Instead, there's a quiet humming, a rhythm pulsing through the temples, through the stones, and through the tight, cobbled alleys of the Aventine Hill. Because tonight, you follow the footsteps of those who sought real contact, not just curses or muttered wishes, but full-blown necromancy. We're talking seances, spellcraft, and dark rituals with real stakes and even darker ingredients. You don't need to knock. The door is already open. The Romans didn't have a word for necromancy exactly. Not in the way we do, but they had practitioners who specialized in calling forth the spirits of the dead. They might be called Sagai, Magistrae, or even Strigai if you were feeling rude. These women, and yes, it was usually women, operated from the fringes of society, herbalists by day, ritualists by moonlight. Think of them as a mix between your grandma with a mortar and pestle, and someone who casually keeps human bones in her closet. Tonight, you're visiting one of them. Let's call her Calpurnia. She lives in a narrow tenement near the city wall, far from the perfumed shops and marble villas. Her home smells of crushed myrrh, vinegar, and something less pleasant you can't identify. Hanging from the rafters, bundles of dried herbs, feathers, and what might be goat tongues. Calpurnia doesn't look up when you enter. She's busy grinding something in a heavy stone bowl. "You're early," she says without turning. That's not creepy. You weren't expected. Or so you thought. Your eyes adjust. The room is lit only by oil lamps, their flames dancing like they're trying to escape. On the table a knife, a spool of black thread, a mirror rimmed in bronze, and a bowl of what looks suspiciously like blood. You're pretty sure that isn't marinara. She finally looks at you. Her eyes are cloudy, not with blindness, but with age and something more. You feel seen, not your face, but your regrets, your secrets. You think about apologizing for the thing with the bakery, but decide now's not the time. Calpurnia begins to chant not Latin exactly, and definitely not Greek. It's older. The syllables click against your teeth like stones. You feel a drop in the temperature, and the air grows thicker. You're told to sit. You don't argue. Then she begins the ritual, historically speaking. Roman necromancy didn't always involve sacrifices or gory rituals. Sometimes it was as simple as sleeping in a tomb, incubatio, hoping for a vision or answer from the dead. But when things got serious, say, you wanted answers to a murder or insight into the future, you had to get messy. Some of the most chilling accounts involved digging up a corpse and reanimating it briefly, using charms and invocations. Others describe rituals held at crossroads, places sacred to Hecate, goddess of witchcraft. Crossroads were perfect, abandoned, liminal, creepy even in daylight. Add in a few torches and the eerie echo of chanting, and you've got yourself a 5-star horror scene. You've probably heard of the Necromancy, or Oracle of the Dead. The most famous one was in Ephora, in Greece. But Roman elites loved visiting for spiritual consultations. It was built near the mouth of the river Acheron, yes, the underworld one. Pilgrims would fast, descend through underground tunnels, and perform purification rites. Then, through smoke and darkness, the dead were said to whisper back answers. It's basically a haunted Ask Jeeves, but not everyone could afford a necromantion. For everyday Romans, necromancy was DIY, do-it-yourself or die trying. Tools of the trade included mirrors for scrying, dolls for channeling, blood sometimes from animals, occasionally from the magician, and grave dirt. The line between superstition and religion was thin, very thin. You glance at Calpurnia again. Her lips are blue now, not from cold, but from whatever she's chewing. She holds up the mirror and instructs you not to blink. The oil lamp flickers once, twice, and then steadies. The mirror fogs up, not from your breath but from inside, and then you see it. No, not a face, not exactly. A memory. Your memory. But it's wrong. It's not how you remember it. The colours are drained, and someone's missing from the scene. Someone who should have been there. Someone who died. Calpurnia speaks a name you haven't told her. A name you haven't said aloud in years. She says it like it's hers. You flinch. She asks what you want. You don't know. Here's a fun historical twist. Scholars still debate whether necromancy was purely theatrical or believed to be real by its practitioners. Was it just performance a deeply elaborate therapy session? Or did some of these magicians truly believe they could drag souls from the afterlife? Calpurnia, for one, believes. She hands you a small vial. Spirit essence, she says. Whatever that means, and tells you to bury it at dawn near a juniper tree. Not before, not after. She also warns don't speak of this to anyone for 3 days. Spoiler, you're definitely going to, before you leave. You notice something strange. The air in the room has stopped moving. The fire isn't flickering anymore. The mirror, now dull, seems heavier than it was. And behind Calpurnia, in the shadows, you think you see a shape, a tall, silent figure. It's not moving, it's not breathing, it's not anything. You back away slowly. Calpurnia smiles. It's just a guest, she says. You don't ask for clarification. On your way home, you walk faster than usual. The streets are empty. The moon is low. You pass a statue of Hecate at the crossroads, triple-faced, eyes covered with soot. Someone's left offerings at her feet: garlic, fish bones, a lock of hair. You decide not to stop, but you feel it. The weight in your pocket, the vial, the whisper of your name behind you. And just for a moment, as you turn the final corner, your shadow splits into two. Here's a lesser-known detail. Some Roman spells required the practitioner to eat odd ingredients. Owl brains, lizard tongues, boiled bats. Why, no one agrees. Some say it was symbolic. Others think it was to test your commitment. Either way, Calpurnia probably has a few recipes. As you finally climb into bed, yes, you're allowed to sleep after all, that you feel something shift inside you. Not possession, not fear, awareness. The sense that Rome is not dead. Not really. It lives in echoes, in corners, in people like Calpurnia who never forgot how to listen. And now, maybe, neither will you. You wake up to a soft creaking, not from your bed, but from the ancient bones of the city around you. Rome stretches and yawns in the early dawn like a tired god shaking off the dust of centuries. The necromancer's vial still weighs on you, tucked deep into your satchel, pulsing faintly with warmth like it's alive, or at least pretending very convincingly. Today, you're not visiting back alley witches or peering into smoky mirrors. No. Today, you go where the empire's elite whispered their fears in gilded halls. Welcome to the upper-class obsession with death. Spoiler alert, the rich were just as terrified of ghosts as anyone else, maybe more. Why? Because they had more to lose. Power, property, legacy. Oh, and the occasional murdered enemy clawing his way back from the afterlife with some serious paperwork. Let's take a stroll down the palatial corridors of paranoia, shall we? You arrive at the domus of Lucius Marcius, a senator so rich he has a mosaic in his pantry. He's holding a private funeral dinner, a custom known as a silicernium, but there's a twist. No one's dead. Yet, this is a rehearsal. That's right. In late Republican and Imperial Rome, the wealthy sometimes stage practice funerals, complete with weeping actors, funereal masks, and even rented mourners. It wasn't just about narcissism, although, let's be honest, Lucius is so that guy. It was about control, you see. Death could be chaotic. Ghosts happened. Wills got contested. Enemies celebrated. Lucius wants to plan for all of it like you might plan your own birthday party, if the candles might bite you. He leads you to a shadowed room, thick with incense. The air is heavy with nard and myrrh, and you swear someone's crying in the corner. It's fine. That's just the paid mourner. She's pacing herself. It's only hour 2. At the heart of this strange party is a table. On it wax death masks of Lucius's ancestors. Their disturbingly lifelike sunken eyes, taut cheeks, knowing frowns. This tradition, called Imagine's Maiorum, was meant to connect Romans with their lineage, literally giving face to the family tree. These masks were worn by actors during funerals to honour the dead, and to remind guests how very important the family was. You stare at one of the masks a moment too long. It stares back. A servant brings you honey cakes and wine spiced with pepper and bay. You don't feel like eating, but everyone's watching. You take a polite bite. It's awful. Lucius, meanwhile, is discussing his ghost clause. It's in his will. If he returns after death to haunt his rivals, he wants it documented that he told them he would. They'll regret questioning my marble statue budget. He mutters. Here's a lesser-known fact: some wealthy Romans hired priests of Lemuria, the ancient Roman festival, to appease restless spirits to pre-cleanse their tombs before burial. Lemuria, held in May, was the original Ghostbuster event. Citizens walked barefoot at midnight, tossing black beans over their shoulders while chanting, "With these I redeem me and mine." Don't laugh. It worked, sometimes. You're handed a bag of beans and a candle, apparently. Lucius wants a mini Lemuria reenactment at the party. Everyone walks around the house, chanting under their breath, tossing beans into shadowy corners. You drop one and it rolls under a table. The paid mourner gasps. "Don't leave the beans unfinished," she hisses. They remember. That's fine, totally fine. Suddenly, Lucius claps his hands. "Now," he announces, "we consult the sorts Virgilianae." This was an actual pastime among the elite, opening a copy of the Aeneid at random and interpreting the line as an omen. Imagine your future determined by Roman poetry, or worse, by bad Latin puns. Lucius hands you the scroll. You unroll it, eyes scanning for a line. You land on Facilis Descensus Averno. The way down to the underworld is easy. Everyone nods solemnly. Someone gasps. You try to smile. It's the historical equivalent of drawing the tower in tarot, but with extra lava. Lucius beams. "How comforting," he says. "Easy access is important. Remember that funeral mirror from Calpurnia's place?" One scholar argued that elite Roman homes also had such mirrors not for vanity, but to reflect spirits. They were sometimes covered after a death, like in other ancient cultures. Why? Because the dead might use them as a portal, or because nobody wants to see their ancestors standing behind them while flossing. You're starting to realise, for all their philosophy and marble busts, rich Romans were just as superstitious as anyone else. They feared restless spirits, lemures, who returned to haunt the living. Not all ghosts were vengeful. Of course, some were just confused, others were gossipy. Lucius's wife, Petronia, leans over. "I had a dream of my grandmother last week," she whispers. "She told me to stop serving lentils. She looks ashamed. I haven't cooked them since." You nod solemnly. There's no arguing with dead grandmas. By now. The funeral rehearsal is wrapping up. Lucius thanks everyone for their presence and reminds them to keep an eye out should he die suddenly. You start to gather your things when he pulls you aside. There's a rumour, he says. They say a necromancer predicted Caligula's death to the hour. He laughed. Until he didn't. He leans closer. Can you find someone like that? You think of Calpurnia. You nod. He hands you a pouch heavy with denarii. Tell her I'm open to appointments. You walk out into the Roman evening. The scent of lilies and iron fills the air. Around you. Windows are being shuttered. The Lemuria rites have stirred something not just superstition, but something real. You feel eyes again. Not hostile, not friendly, just watching. As you cross a narrow bridge, you hear a child reciting something. A rhyme. You strain to listen. Dead men speak when beans are spilled. Ancient mass the night has filled. Echoes in the silent hall. Who will come when shadows call? You don't look back. You keep walking. Historical side note. Elite Romans sometimes arrange for their tombs to include messages, defixiones or curse tablets, warning any trespassers of ghostly retaliation. One tablet discovered read, "Let him, who disturbs this grave, have no peace in life or death." Another simply read, "You will rot, clearly, even after death." Romans were not chill. You wonder what Lucius's future tomb might say. Beware the senator still checks the marble budget. You chuckle, but the vial is still warm in your pocket, and you swear, just for a second. One of the wax masks blinked. The city grows quieter after dark, but not more peaceful. In Rome, the absence of sound doesn't mean calm, it means something is holding its breath. You find yourself back in the Subura district, the underbelly of the eternal city, where things fester in alleyways and secrets are traded like olives at the market. Tonight, you're not here for street food or stolen scrolls. You're here to find the curse makers, the shadowy specialists in dark inscriptions, and the twisted world of Roman defixiones. The locals call them whisper writers. They're business curses, written in tight, scratchy Latin or Greek, then hammered into lead and buried where the gods or something older might hear. You duck into a perfumer's shop that smells aggressively of mint and regret. The owner doesn't look up when you say the name Dion of Ephesus. A pause, then a nod. You're handed a small pouch and pointed toward a staircase leading underground. Of course, the real magic is always in the basement. Dion isn't what you expect. No black robes, no bone jewellery, no dramatic thunderclaps. Just a tired man in a tunic smeared with wax and something suspiciously metallic. He's hunched over a small desk, carving furiously into a piece of lead. He doesn't look up. Name. You hesitate. Not mine. You say, "I'm here to learn." That gets his attention. He puts down his stylus and gestures to a shelf crowded with curse tablets. Each one is a whispered wish for revenge. "Look around," he says. It's all grief in Latin. You browse. Some tablets are rolled tight, some folded, some pierced with nails. Most are addressed to the gods of the underworld, Dispater, Proserpina, Hecate. Others are stranger, naming spirits unknown to standard Roman religion. One simply says to the cold one beneath the well, "Take his voice, leave his teeth." You shiver, a common misconception. Romans were publicly stoic, privately superstitious. Curse tablets, defixiones were everywhere, even though they were technically illegal. They were used for everything to silence rivals in court, ruin a lover's new flame, curse a thief, or even hex an athlete in a chariot race. That's right, people sabotage sports with magic. The ancient world invented fantasy leagues and fantasy sabotage. You pick up a tablet that reads, "Bind the tongue and limbs of Gaius the charioteer. Let his horses stumble. Let his wheels shatter. May he eat dust before the third lap." Harsh, but oddly poetic. Dion sits you down. Most people get it wrong. He says, they think a curse is about hate, but really, it's about control, about making the universe behave. He hands you a blank sheet of lead and a stylus. Try it. You hesitate. What if I don't have anyone I want to curse? Dion shrugs. Then write the name of someone who scares you. Your hand moves without thinking. The name that spills onto the lead isn't one you expected. It's your own. He nods, solemn, braver than most. Some curse tablets were buried with the dead, especially those who died violently. Why? Because such spirits were believed to be restless and more likely to carry messages or mayhem between worlds. Others were thrown into sacred wells, nailed to temple walls, or buried at crossroads, places where the veil between realms thinned. Dion shows you his map of the city. Marked in red are the hot spots where curses are most likely to take. The theatre of Pompey, the baths of Caracalla, the old well behind the temple of Vesta. He points to one spot that's been circled 5 times. The Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer of Rome, oldest flow in the city. He murmurs, takes everything waste, blood, whispers. There's something in that water that listens. He offers to take you. You follow him through the streets, the moon a pale coin overhead. Dion talks as he walks, about how the earliest curses were written backward to confuse the living, about how some were folded around hair, fingernails, or scraps of clothing, sympathetic magic at its finest. Some people think you need to believe in it for it to work, he says. They're wrong. You just need to mean it. Eventually, you reach the great sewer's edge. The Cloaca Maxima yawns before you, breathing out damp decay and ancient secrets. Dion kneels, says a prayer you don't understand, and drops the lead tablet into the darkness. You wait. Nothing happens. Then a ripple. Not water. A voice. Too low to be heard properly. Too sharp to be wind. Dion doesn't flinch. You do. Fun fact one Defixio found in Bath, ancient Aquae Sulis reads, Docimedes has lost 2 gloves. He asked that the person who has stolen them should lose their minds and eyes in the temple where you appoint. Curse, severity. Apparently, was directly proportional to how expensive your gloves were. Scholars still debate whether some curses were written in nonsense syllables on purpose like magical encryption, or maybe it was a ritual language lost to time. One thing's clear, these weren't just venting. They were believed to do something. You ask Dion, have any of your curses ever come true? He looks at you. All of them. As you walk back through the city, you pass a statue of Mercury, god of travellers and thieves. A small offering bowl lies at its base, inside a folded lead tablet. You lean in. It reads, may she dream of fire until she speaks the truth. It's addressed to you. You spin around. The street is empty, but the vial in your bag pulses once hot, then cold, and your name echoes again in your head, like someone's whispering it through bone. Historical side note. Archaeologists have found thousands of curse tablets throughout the Roman Empire, some so well preserved that you can still see the nail holes. Many were written in informal Latin or Greek, full of slang, anger, and deeply personal details. These weren't distant rituals. They were raw, immediate, and shockingly human. You begin to understand Roman necromancy wasn't just about talking to the dead. It was about commanding them, and some of those commands are still waiting to be answered. Like echoes in lead, beneath your feet. Right now, Rome sleeps lightly, like a cat curled in the sun, one eye open, claws half unsheathed. You wake before dawn. The sky a hazy indigo. The city above is silent, but beneath it, something stirs. You've felt it since last night, the heaviness in the air, the way your footsteps echo too long in the street, like someone's following, but no one ever is. Today, you're not wandering marketplaces or watching curse tablets plop into sewers. Today, you're heading deeper into the bone-cold rituals of Roman funerary magic, where the dead aren't just mourned, they're used. You meet your contact in a cemetery just outside the Porta Nomentana. Her name is Callistrata, and she dresses like a widow on a theatrical budget, layers of black linen, hands stained with herbs, and an owl feather tucked behind one ear. She carries a satchel full of small bones, lamp oil, and what looks suspiciously like a human tooth. You're here to learn, she asks. You nod. She smiles. Good. But first you dig. You do. With a spade older than you, in soil that smells like iron and secrets. You hit something solid, a tile lid. Beneath it, an infant burial unmarked, one of hundreds in these margins of the city. The Romans didn't always burn their dead. Callistrata explains, the young, especially the unbaptized. The unweaned were often buried under homes or thresholds, liminal spaces. Not quite in this world, not quite out. Fact-drop Romans cremated most adults, placing their ashes in urns and columbaria, but infants were frequently buried whole, especially under doorways, possibly to protect the household. These tiny tombs became thresholds in every sense, and in magic thresholds are power zones. That's where spirits slip through. You sit cross-legged as Callistrata prepares a ritual. She grinds myrrh, rue, and something so pungent it makes your eyes water. We're not summoning, she says. We're feeding. A flicker of surprise crosses your face. She elaborates the mains. The spirits of the dead can be coaxed, if you treat them well. They'll help you, guide dreams, guard roads, ruin enemies, but you must pay. She pours milk into a cracked bowl and adds honey, wine, and a pinch of black sand. Food for the forgotten. She sets the bowl on the grave, whispers a chant, and waits. You're about to ask what happens next when you hear it, a soft click-click. Like fingernails on stone. The air chills, your breath fogs. Then, warmth, relief, like someone sighed and walked away. Callistrata smiles. He liked it. You try not to look at the empty bowl now half full of ash. Cultural side note. The Romans held an annual festival called Parentalia, honouring deceased family members with offerings of bread soaked in wine. But if you forgot your dead bad news, they could return as Lemia's angry, wandering shades. Romans had a separate festival for those too, called Lemuria, complete with black beans and midnight rituals to banish the vengeful ones. You know, typical Tuesday stuff. Callistrata leads you next to an abandoned domus wealthy once. Judging by the marble teeth poking from the weeds, she kicks open a half-buried cellar. Sometimes, she murmurs, we don't wait for the dead to speak. We encourage them. You descend into the dark, torch flickering. The room is full of jars, not urns. Jars, filled with murky liquid, bones, bits of cloth, hair, sympathetic magic, she says. You build a spirit double a vessel, fill it with echoes, something from the dead, something from the living. Stir well. She pulls one jar down. Inside a wax figure, bound in red thread, pierced with pins. Is that her? Yes, and it works. She looks at you. No one's come to collect a refund. The next step is bolder, a necromantic incubation. You're to sleep beside a tomb and await a message in dreams. Bring this, she says, handing you a vial of poppy extract. And this, a tiny statue of Mercury, Psychopompos Mercury, the guide of souls. You lie on the slab. The stone is cold, hard. The wind moans low through the crypt entrance. Sleep takes you in jagged pieces. You dream of doors, of mouths that don't open, of a man with no eyes holding a scroll made of skin. He says your name backwards, and you wake up with blood in your mouth. In the morning, you scribble what you remember. The man's message, find the third tooth. You tell Callistrata. She's silent for a moment, then says, you've been marked. You blink. Is that good? She doesn't answer. Academic curiosity. Scholars still debate whether Roman necromantic rituals were actual widespread practices or fringe behaviours exaggerated by poets and playwrights. But the physical evidence, tombs with offering pipes, jars with symbolic objects, even graffiti calling on dead relatives for favours suggests a culture where the boundaries between living and dead were, let's say, porous. Callistrata gives you a parting gift, a small bundle wrapped in linen. Inside is a bone too smooth, too perfect to be animal. You'll know when to use it, she says. And with that, she vanishes into the mist like every good necromancer should. You return to the city with dirt under your nails, a new bone in your bag, and a creeping suspicion that someone or something is walking 2 steps behind you. Always 2 steps, just out of sight, but you can feel it, watching, waiting. listening. The streets of Rome feel different now. Not louder, not quieter, just heavier. You walk them with the uneasy knowledge that the dead don't always stay put, that in the dark recesses of the empire, people whisper to bones, to ashes, to jars filled with teeth. But tonight, you're following something stranger than ghosts, the imperial obsession with oracles, visions, and state-sanctioned predictions. Welcome to the part of the story where emperors ask questions and the gods answer with riddles that ruin lives. You begin your evening at the base of the Capitoline Hill. It's quiet now, but once this place roared with questions, not the kind you ask out loud. Should I buy this goat, but the kind you whisper behind closed doors? Will the emperor die this year? Is the grain ship safe? Can we win this war? In those answers, they didn't come from logic or debate. They came from birds. Yes, birds. Fact drop. The ancient Romans practiced augury, the reading of omens through birds' flight patterns. Special priests called augurs would observe how birds flew, what direction they took, whether they chirped or stayed silent. A raven flying left bad news. A crow calling thrice might want to delay that battle. You find yourself watching a ceremony. A young augur in pristine white robes stands at dawn, his staff held high. His eyes scan the sky like he's browsing a celestial spreadsheet. Suddenly, he smiles. 2 birds, perfectly timed, soar across the Tiber. Favour of the gods, he whispers. And a general miles away gets the green light to march into Gaul. Spoiler, he dies in 3 days. But the bird's totally accurate for about 6 minutes. From birds, we move to books, ancient scrolls. To be precise, the Sibylline books, held in a temple vault so secret even the Senate needs special permission to consult them. These scrolls aren't bedtime reading, they're apocalypse insurance. Natural disaster, consult the books. Flood books, drought, war, plague books. Books, books. The Sibyl's legendary prophetesses wrote in riddles so tangled they'd make a crossword puzzle cry. But emperors took them seriously. Very seriously. You sneak into a back room where a copyist translates a passage aloud. To silence fire, offer water on a hill, let the hooves of 10 oxen trample the ash. The priest nods. So, we build a fountain in the forum and sacrifice oxen. You clear your throat. Couldn't that also mean literally anything else? He blinks. That's not how riddles work. Oddity. Alert. The Sibylline books were supposedly destroyed in a fire in 83 BCE, but that didn't stop Augustus from reconstructing them from scratch. How? By collecting all prophetic scrolls in the empire and picking the best ones. Basically ancient Rome's first book club. As the sun sets, you wander to the Palatine Hill, where the emperor once dined with stars in his eyes. Not celebrity stars, literal stars. Astrology was big in Rome, huge. Charts, omens, planetary alignments. It wasn't just personal, it was political. Emperors rose and fell based on birth dates. You duck into a villa. Inside a celestial chart stretched across a ceiling, constellations painted in gold. A scholar sits below, drawing lines with trembling fingers. Jupiter opposes Saturn. He murmurs, "That's not great." "Why?" He stares at you. "Saturn devours his children." You slowly back away. Academic tension. Roman elites were obsessed with astrology, but also terrified of it. In fact, under Emperor Tiberius, astrologers had to register with the state, and predicting the emperor's death was a capital crime. You could literally get executed for saying, "Mars looks cranky." Next, you're led to a cave, not a metaphor. A literal cave, dark, humid, and pulsing with old energy. This is the oracle of Faunus, a rustic Roman god who gave answers through dreams. You're told to drink a strong herbal infusion, lie on a sacred hide, and wait. You lie there, eyes open. The silence thickens. Then a dream. A wolf with 3 heads, a tree that bleeds honey, a voice your voice saying, "Build no more above the dead." You jolt awake. Your hands are sticky with sap, but no one else sees it. You tell your guide, He shrugs. Could mean anything. That's not helpful. He smiles. That is the point. You return to the city at night. The temples are quiet. The priests asleep. But the walls breathe. Statues seem to shift when you're not looking. And somewhere, in a locked room, a senator clutches a parchment with his star chart, panicking that Venus is in retrograde again. You pass a temple where a group of women chant softly, Vestal Virgins, protectors of Rome's eternal flame. They don't interpret omens. They are omens. If the flame dies, Rome dies. Simple math. One turns to you. Don't ask questions you're not ready to hear answered. You blink. She's gone. You head back to your lodgings. A scroll waits at your door. No name. Just a wax seal shaped like a bird in flight. Inside, one line. He has the third tooth. You drop the scroll. The street is empty. But again that feeling. 2 steps behind you. Breathing. Waiting. Smiling. The sun has barely risen. But you're already awake. Listening. Not to the chirping of birds or the bustle of Roman merchants, but to something deeper. Subterranean. You could almost swear the ground itself is murmuring. That's not poetic exaggeration. You're heading beneath Rome, into a world far darker than death are the tunnels of cursed burial grounds, black market necromancers, and magical traps meant to imprison souls, if you thought necromancy was strange in public. Wait until you see what happens in secret. Your descent begins at an unmarked entrance, behind a crumbling temple once dedicated to Mercury, god of messages and thieves. Fitting. The path down is narrow and slick. You light a torch and squeeze through, your shoulders brushing cold stone carved with spirals and animal teeth. And then, suddenly, space opens. A chamber stretches before you, walls covered with hexes, bones, and something that looks suspiciously like chicken scratches, written by someone in a trance. You've arrived at a private necromancer's workshop. Fact drop. While Roman necromancy was technically illegal, especially under later imperial laws, many private citizens still pay practitioners to curse their enemies or speak to the dead. These were the Margoi wandering mages from Egypt, Greece or Persia, feared and sought after in equal measure. You watch as a client kneels before the necromancer. She holds a small pouch, something wet and dark drips from its seams. I want him to suffer. She whispers, I want his tongue to rot. The necromancer doesn't blink. He simply takes the pouch and empties it into a bowl. Nails, hair, teeth, and a sliver of wax shaped like a man. His knife carves words into the wax. Greek, not Latin, the language of older, deeper magic. You don't ask questions, you just try not to breathe too loudly. Behind him, rows of Defictiones cursed tablets hang on wires, each one etched in lead, rolled tightly, and nailed to the walls or buried in graves. Some call for justice, others, revenge. A few are just unsettling. Bind his hands and feet, let his horses stumble, let his wife turn to salt. You wonder who writes these, then you wonder who deserves them. Then you realise probably everyone. Unusual detail. Some cursed tablets included drawings, crude stick figures with twisted limbs, bound by chains or pierced by spikes. Early emoji of agony, if you will. You follow a path deeper into the catacombs. Here lie the Ataphioi, the unburied dead. Criminals, slaves, the poor. Those who died in shame or far from home. Romans feared these spirits most of all. To die without a proper burial was to be stuck in the in-between, haunting crossroads and drains, looking for offerings or a voice. And necromancers loved them. Why? Because they're easier to summon, easier to manipulate, easier to promise false hope. Academic debate. Scholars still argue over whether Romans genuinely believed the dead could speak, or if necromancers were just particularly good at theatre. Some say it was all smoke and mirrors. Others point to ancient rituals involving ventriloquism, voice pipes, and hidden accomplices. You enter a chamber filled with mirrors, not glass but polished obsidian. The air is cold. You see your reflection multiply, distort, vanish, reappear. A necromancer sits cross-legged, eyes closed, in his lap, a bowl filled with black liquid. You ask, "What are you doing?" He answers without opening his eyes, "I'm fishing." For voices. You lean closer. The bowl ripples. You hear crying, whispering, your own name. You step back fast. He smiles. "See?" The air grows heavier as you pass into what they call the stone mouth, a natural cave believed to be a gate. Not metaphorically, literally. They say it leads to the underworld, and just outside, placed deliberately, are piles of offerings, coins, poppy cakes, bloodied cloth, and in one case, a tiny carved boat filled with fingernails. Romantic. You're told not to touch anything. You nod. Then you trip over a bone. It cracks. Everyone stares at you. You apologize to the spirits. Just in case. You exit the tunnels just before dawn. The world above feels too bright, too clean, too unaware. You watch people buy bread, argue over fish prices, flirt by the fountains, and you wonder if any of them know what lies just beneath their feet. Probably not, and maybe that's why they sleep so well. But your day isn't over. You're invited to a ritual in a countryside villa, a necromantic symposium. You expect wine, you get blood. The villa is gorgeous. Olive trees sway. The sun sets golden over the hills, and in the garden. 7 guests sit in a circle. At the centre a burial urn and a lyre. A woman in crimson begins to chant not in Latin, but Etruscan, the language of the dead. The others hum in response. Then from the urn, smoke rises, shadows flicker. The lyre strums itself. You don't blink, because you can't. Joke break, you try whispering. "I think this is above my pay grade." But the spirit apparently only understands ancient Greek. The ceremony ends without explanation. The guests eat grapes in silence. You chew slowly, as something crunches. You don't ask what it is. Smart. You return to your quarters at midnight. Your sandals still damp from cave water and regret. You swear your shadow is 1 step behind you now. Just one. Always one. And tonight, the stars are too quiet. The dream doesn't feel like a dream. It begins the moment you close your eyes. You're standing in the middle of a Roman street empty, though you can hear the sound of sandals scraping stone behind you. The sky is purple. The buildings cast no shadows, and every door is closed. You try to speak, but your voice doesn't come out. A figure steps from the alley, a woman in black robes, her hands caked with earth. She places 1 finger to her lips, and suddenly you're back in the world of Roman necromancy. Only this time, it's your own name being called through the veil. You wake up gasping. That's the thing about sleep in the ancient world, it wasn't always rest. Sometimes it was travel. Sometimes it was invitation. Romans believed dreams were one of the main channels through which the dead communicated with the living. Temples had designated dream chambers called incubation halls, where people went to sleep with the gods and wait for visions. And you've got a full night ahead. Fact time. The god Somnus Sleep was said to live in a cave where the sun never shone, surrounded by poppies and softly dripping water. His sons Morpheus, Phobator, and Phantasos brought dreams of humans, animals, and surreal symbols. Dream interpretation wasn't just a parlor trick. It was a major part of Roman medical and religious life. You travelled to a sanctuary in the countryside dedicated to Aesculapius, god of healing. But healing doesn't always mean herbs. Here, patients lie on mats beneath frescoes of serpents and stars, waiting for dream visions that might guide them to a cure or a warning. You take your place among them, the scent of laurel and olive oil in the air, and try not to think about the man next to you mumbling in Greek. Sleep comes slow, but when it does, it hits hard. You're no longer lying down. You're walking a bridge made of bones, suspended over a chasm filled with whispering voices. Below you, shades swim like fish. A man with no eyes asking you what you've lost. You say nothing. He nods like that's the right answer. You wake up soaked in sweat. The priest beside you hands you a tablet. Write it down. All of it. You don't ask what happens if you forget. Strange detail. Some Romans believed the dead sent dreams not just for communication, but but for correction calling out bad behaviour, debts unpaid, or even poor fashion choices at funerals. Spirits could be petty. One ancient inscription even scolds a woman for wearing red when she should have worn mourning white. Ouch. A few days later, you attend a private gathering and elite dream symposium, held by a senator obsessed with oniric knowledge. Guests wear masks shaped like owls, wolves, and even clouds. The room is lit with only oil lamps and moonlight filtered through mica windows. A young woman reads aloud from a scroll of prophetic dreams recorded by Artemidorus, the ancient dream analyst. Then, you're each handed a small cup of poppy wine. You're going under, she says. You drink. Academic footnote. Scholars still debate how much of Roman dream work was influenced by Egyptian incubation practices, especially from the temples like Serapeum in Alexandria. Cross-cultural mingling was common, and it's likely Roman dream interpreters borrowed freely from older traditions, including Egyptian hieroglyphs representing sleep, vision, and resurrection. You lie back and wait. The wine hits fast. Your thoughts stretch like wax in the sun. You hear a bell, and then you're nowhere. That's the best word for it. Nowhere. Then the walls pulse. A lion speaks. You speak back. You don't remember what you say, but the room claps when you wake up. You've apparently passed the threshold trial. Cool, but also terrifying, because they hand you a new name, Vox Umbrae, voice of the shadow, and suddenly, you're part of something much bigger than you thought. You don't say no. Would you? Joke break. You ask if there's a refund policy for spontaneous spiritual initiation. The answer is a stare and another cup of wine. Later, you meet a group of nocturne people who specialize in sending messages through dreams. They train to recognize symbols, control dream landscapes, even enter others' minds allegedly. They claim they once stopped a senator from murdering his brother by giving him a dream about choking on gold coins. Wild. You don't know whether to laugh or be impressed. Possibly both. The line between reality and dream thins every day. You start leaving notes to yourself when you wake up, if the moon is smiling. Don't answer the door, or don't trust the woman with the silver tongue. Your handwriting gets worse. Your dreams get louder. You begin hearing stories, real accounts of dream-born necromancy, like the merchant who dreamed of his dead mother warning him about poisoned figs. He ignored her. He died. Or the girl who dreamed every night of a field on fire. One day, she found the same field, burned, with a buried child beneath it. Dreams were not entertainment. They were messages, portals, warnings, and occasionally, revenge. You learn that some necromancers specialize only in dream work, avoiding physical rituals entirely. They eat only certain herbs, sleep on goat skins, and isolate themselves for weeks, seeking dream contact. One such practitioner agrees to let you watch. He falls asleep in under a minute. You wait. He thrashes, moans, then goes still. You lean in. His lips move. He says your name. You don't sleep for 2 days. You visit the Library of the Winds, a private archive of recorded visions, maintained by a secretive cult. They believe time is circular, and that dreams reveal previous loops. You browse scrolls, filled with wild imagery, a centurion made of glass, a snake that whispers recipes, a girl floating inside a silver apple. Some are just absurd, others feel too familiar. You find one that describes your own dream, the bone bridge, the eyeless man, the silent answer. It's dated 200 years before you were born, so that's fun. You sit in the quiet, and somewhere, in the back of your skull, you hear a voice laugh, softly, like it's known you for centuries. The line between waking and dreaming has all but disappeared. You're not entirely sure when you last had a full night's sleep without seeing dead people. The whispering from beneath your bed has stopped it being scary. It's more like background music now. Roman necromancy has wrapped itself around you like a second skin. And tonight, your journey leads you deeper into the forbidden rituals of dream resurrections and posthumous justice. Yes, that's a thing. We start in a valley long abandoned. You're travelling to a sanctuary built for one purpose, calling the unjustly dead into dreams to right ancient wrongs. The Romans called it somnius vindicta, revenge through dreams. You duck under crumbling arches, your torch sputtering, and enter a marble hall carved with stars and howling faces. The floor is cold, so is the air, so are the voices. They're not threatening, just disappointed. You lie down on the obsidian slab. Around you are bowls filled with ash and feathers, old brass bells, and a sleeping goat. You try not to think about it. The priest tells you to focus on the person you seek, a woman murdered by her own husband. Never given burial. You don't know her name. You only know she keeps showing up in your dreams, screaming without sound. They call it the visitation rite. And the moment you close your eyes, you're pulled under like a stone in deep water. Fact drop. Some Romans believed certain people were dream magnets, natural mediums through whom the dead could speak with clarity. These individuals were often women, children, or epileptics whose condition was once called the sacred disease. Shrines dedicated to these oracles functioned like spiritual call centers. In the dream, the floor cracks like poison from below. The woman appears. She does not walk. She floats. Her mouth is open. You still hear no voice, but you understand anyway. She wants you to bring her bones home. You nod. You wake up holding a tiny coin in ancient obol, the kind used to pay Charon, the ferryman of the dead. Okay, that wasn't there before. You're given instructions, a list, 3 items, a flower she loved, a lock of your hair, a piece of clothing from her murderer. Yeah, that last one is going to be tricky. This is not your average dream quest. This is full-on spirit detective mode, and the stakes are high. If you fail to gather the objects, her soul will never rest, and she'll likely keep showing up in the dreams of anyone you've ever met. Socially awkward, at best. So off you go. Obscure but real fact in some Roman households. People would leave spirit offerings on their windowsills during the festival of Lemuria, just in case any vengeful dreams were still hanging around. Items included bread soaked in wine, beans tossed over the shoulder, and even whispered apologies. You find the flower a faded marigold, pressed inside an old love letter, stashed in the ruins of her home. You find the lock of hair your own, snipped beneath the moon with a silver knife, and after an awkward conversation with a very confused descendant of the murderer, you obtain an old cloak, believed to be his. The dream chamber awaits. This time, you're not alone. 3 figures join you, all marked by restless sleep. 1 man hasn't dreamed in 12 years. 1 woman dreams only of falling teeth. The 3rd says nothing but smells like sandalwood and myrrh. Together, you lie on the floor. The priest rings a bell, and then the dream opens like a stage curtain. You're in a Roman courtroom, marble hacked on gold, and ghosts. The woman stands on one side, the husband on the other, his face a melting wax mask. You present the objects. The marigold bursts into flame. The hair floats upward like a butterfly. The cloak wraps itself around the murderer, tightening until he falls to his knees. The crowd of spirits claps. She vanishes. Free! And just like that, you've helped perform one of the most complex necromantic rituals in Roman culture. A judicial resolution through dreams. Also, you get a souvenir, a ring that wasn't on your finger when you went to sleep. You don't question it. You're just tired. Academic oddity scholars still argue whether the Roman dream rituals were literal, symbolic, or simply poetic metaphors for grief. Some say these rituals were early forms of therapy, safe spaces, to work through trauma and injustice. Others believe they were entirely spiritual, part of a cosmology where justice couldn't end at death. You believe whatever gets you the most sleep. As the days pass, you stop dreaming altogether. It's strange. You miss the weirdness, the floating goats, the talking lions, even the lady with no voice. But there's peace in the silence, and then one final dream comes. You're back on the bone bridge. The eyeless man is there again. This time he speaks. You've done well, but sleep is not the end. You ask what comes next. He says nothing, just points. You turn and see your own face, smiling. The dream dissolves into stars. Now, You've wandered through the darkest corridors of the Roman world where death was not an end, but merely a threshold. The dreams, the rituals, the whispers in the shadows, they're all part of a universe where memory, sorrow, and love stretch far beyond the boundaries of time. You're not afraid anymore, are you? You've grown used to the presence of spirits, to the wordless language of sleep. Your breathing slows, it feels like you're drifting. Your breath blends with the night wind. Now, everything begins to fade, the bridge of bones dissolves into mist. The eyeless man turns away, and the oil lamps flicker out, one by one, in a room where no one remains awake. You close your eyes without effort. Every sound is smooth as water. Every thought quiets, and in that final place, where sleep wraps around you like a warm cloth, you're no longer just a witness. You've become part of the story, part of the dream, part of that gentle, endless dark.